Imagine this: a peaceful town, a small local bakery, and a group of arrogant bikers thinking they can push around anyone they want. When they spot the baker's daughter behind the counter, they don't think twice about throwing insults her way, expecting her to back down. But what they don't know is that she's not just any girl working the counter. Her father, a retired Navy SEAL, has taught her how to handle much worse than bullies on bikes. As the bikers push further, the tension builds. They think it's just another easy day of messing with someone they deem weak, until they realize they've made the biggest mistake of their lives. What happens next is nothing short of shocking. Stay tuned because you won't believe what happens when the daughter's past comes back to challenge the biker's arrogance in a way they never saw coming. Does the bakery become the last place they expect to face real consequences? Keep watching to find out. The bakery, a small family-owned business, had always been a symbol of peace and community. For years, it had served as a warm, welcoming spot where locals gathered for fresh pastries and a hot cup of coffee. But that morning, the usual calm was shattered when the group of bikers rolled into town. With their leather jackets and loud engines, they had a reputation for stirring trouble wherever they went. And today, they decided to make the bakery their next target. The baker's daughter, Lily, had grown up with stories of her father's time in the Navy SEALs. While he was retired now, his lessons were still fresh in her mind. Lessons about discipline, strength, and standing up for yourself. Lily was no stranger to conflict. She'd seen her father face life or death situations and come out stronger. But the bikers had no idea who they were messing with. As they pushed her further, mocking her with cruel words and rude gestures, something inside Lily snapped. Her father's words echoed in her mind, and she took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But the tension in the air was thick. The bikers had no idea that by messing with her, they were about to learn what real strength looked like. Lily stood her ground, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as the bikers continued to taunt her. They were getting louder now, making fun of her appearance, her quiet demeanor. They clearly thought she was just another small-town girl, easily intimidated. But she wasn't. Not anymore. She could feel her pulse quicken, a familiar rush of adrenaline flooding her system. She'd been taught to never show fear, no matter the odds. From the corner of the room, an older man sitting at a table watched in silence. He'd been a regular at the bakery for years, always coming in for his morning coffee and a few pastries. But today, he was watching the scene unfold with a sense of unease. He knew Lily's father had seen the quiet strength in him whenever they spoke. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for, but he had a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to end well. Meanwhile, the leader of the bikers, a burly man named Hank, took a step closer to Lily, his shadow looming over her. "What, you gonna cry, little girl?" he sneered. The rest of the gang laughed, egging him on. But Lily wasn't about to break. She had faced tougher challenges growing up with a Navy SEAL father, and this wasn't the first time she'd had to stand her ground. Her thoughts raced. Should she call her father now? She didn't want to drag him back into a world he'd left behind, but she couldn't let these men walk all over her. Every second felt like an eternity. The tension in the room was thick, and everyone could sense that things were about to explode. The more Hank pushed, the more Lily's resolve hardened. But in that moment, she heard a voice, soft but steady, from the back of the room. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward the man who had been watching quietly from his corner. Hank, with his smug grin, looked momentarily confused. He turned to the old man, not sure if he should laugh or threaten him. "I'm just saying," the man continued, his voice calm but firm. "You don't know who you're messing with." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the old man now. It was Mr. Thompson, a retired military veteran who'd always been respectful toward her father. But the real shock came when she noticed the small bulge under his jacket, something she'd never seen before. A glimpse of something far more dangerous than a simple civilian. Could it be? The tension in the room shifted, and Hank seemed to hesitate, his bravado faltering for the first time. The bikers glanced at one another, uncertain. Lily felt her breath catch in her throat. Was she about to witness something she wasn't prepared for? The air was electric, with the promise of something coming, something that would change everything. But what? And who would walk away unscathed when it was all over? The room was thick with anticipation, each breath more fragile than the last. Hank's eyes flicked between Lily and Mr. Thompson, sizing up the old man with growing suspicion. The bikers who had been laughing moments ago were now dead silent, watching with a mixture of curiosity and unease. There was something in the air, something that told them this wasn't going to be like any other confrontation they'd had before. Lily could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She didn't know exactly what Mr. Thompson was capable of, but the look in his eyes, calm, collected, and unshaken, told her he wasn't just some retired vet trying to keep the peace. He was someone who had seen conflict firsthand. Someone who knew what was at stake when things got dangerous. Hank took another step toward him, his voice low but dripping with contempt. "You think you can scare me, old man?" Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. He just shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. "I don't need to scare you, Hank. I'm just telling you to walk away." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of something unspoken. Hank's smirk faltered, just for a second. He looked back at his gang, seeking some sign of reassurance. They were as tense as he was, uncertain of what was coming next. One of them shifted uncomfortably, the tension too thick to ignore. Lily's heart pounded. The moment she had been dreading was fast approaching. Would Hank back down? Or was this the spark that would ignite everything? Suddenly, Hank barked a laugh, a sharp, mocking sound that seemed to break the silence. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, his voice shifting from anger to something darker, more dangerous. "But you don't know who you're dealing with." Lily's stomach twisted. The bikers were unpredictable, volatile. One wrong move could set them off, and then everything would spiral out of control. She could feel her father's training coming back to her in sharp bursts, focus, calm, and an awareness of what was happening around her. Mr. Thompson didn't move, his eyes never leaving Hank's. The room was on the edge of a knife, and neither side was willing to make the first mistake. Lily swallowed, trying to keep her composure. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. She could hear her own breathing, the faint click of the door's hinges in the wind outside, the faint rustle of the biker jackets. The bakery, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt like a battlefield. Then out of nowhere, Hank stepped forward quickly, his hand reaching toward the back of his jacket. Lily froze. She knew what that meant. This wasn't just about words anymore. Whatever happened next, it would push them all past the point of no return. The air crackled, charged with the threat of violence, but no one moved. Not yet. Lily's mind raced. Was this it? Would everything she had been taught by her father be enough to protect her? Or would this fight escalate in ways she couldn't even imagine? The room held its breath, waiting for the moment to explode. Just as Hank's hand reached for the back of his jacket, a sudden sharp voice cut through the tension in the room. "Don't even think about it." Everyone froze. The sound of a car engine revving outside shattered the silence, followed by the screech of tires on the asphalt. In an instant, the front door of the bakery burst open with a violent crash, and a tall figure stepped inside, framed by the blinding light of the late afternoon sun. Lily's heart skipped. She knew that silhouette all too well. It was her father. The bikers immediately froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. Hank's hand, still hovering near his jacket, faltered as he stared at the man who had just entered. His posture shifted, as if the presence of a new player on the field had completely altered the game. The man who stood in the doorway was none other than the legendary Navy SEAL, retired and now living in quiet anonymity, Lily's father, Jack. His broad shoulders, the same ones that had once carried the weight of hundreds of covert missions, filled the doorway with an imposing presence. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the situation with an intensity that sent a chill through the air. "Everyone's a little too loud in here." Jack's voice was low, calm, but laced with an edge of authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere. The bikers, who had moments ago been ready to throw down, now seemed less certain. Hank's face twitched as he slowly stepped back, his eyes narrowing with a mix of fear and anger. "So the quiet baker's got a hero for a dad," he muttered, trying to regain his bravado. But there was no denying the shift in power. Lily's father was a man who commanded respect, and the bikers, tough as they were, weren't sure they wanted to test the man who had survived the harshest training in the world. The old man, Mr. Thompson, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, let out a small sigh of relief. He'd known Jack long enough to understand that when he entered a room, the dynamics would change. The bikers might not have realized it yet, but they were about to face something they hadn't prepared for. But the suspense didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Jack didn't make a move toward Hank or any of the others. Instead, he turned to Lily, his eyes softening for just a moment, though the weight of everything hung between them. "Lily, are you all right?" His voice was steady, the concern for his daughter clear, but there was no panic in his tone. He wasn't the kind of man who panicked. Before she could answer, Hank broke the silence. His face flushed with rage. "You think you can just walk in here and intimidate us? You're nothing but a washed-up soldier, old man," he spat, trying to regain control. "This is our town, not yours." The other bikers, emboldened by Hank's words, seemed ready to back him up. But Jack's response was immediate. Without saying another word, he stepped further into the room, closing the space between him and Hank in one swift motion. His presence alone made the bikers stumble back, instinctively wary of the man who had seen and survived things they couldn't even imagine. Lily's pulse raced. Her father's actions were deliberate, measured, nothing like the chaotic aggression she'd seen from the bikers. But what happened next shocked everyone. With a sudden motion, Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, unassuming object, a patch. The emblem was familiar to Lily, one she had seen hundreds of times at home. It was a symbol of the Navy SEALs. Hank's eyes flickered, his confidence faltering. The room seemed to shake around them. The other bikers had no idea what kind of man they were really dealing with. But as Jack stood there, unflinching, he made no move to escalate things further. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to prove anything. It was clear now he was in control. But the question still hung in the air. What would the bikers do next? Would they back off, or had they gone too far to turn back? The tension between father and daughter, between veteran and gang, was now a powder keg waiting to explode. Would the bikers back down, or would Jack be forced to show them just how far he was willing to go to protect his daughter? The room was so quiet, it felt as if